The air itself tasted of wood smoke and the sweet decay of fallen leaves, a scent that clung to everything in Oakhaven as the days shortened and the chill bite of winter began to creep into our bones. I was only 10 harvests old, but even I knew that this year's feast felt different. Not just the usual buzz of excitement that rippled through the village, a joyous tremor that made my heart pound like a drum when I thought of roasted boar and honeyed mead. No, there was an undercurrent, a faint discordant note in the harmony of anticipation. Our village, Oakhaven, nestled deep in the valley between the whispering peaks and the great river, had always been blessed. Our fields yielded golden grains, our orchards burst with fruit, and the forest provided ample game. The harvest feast was our sacred tradition, a time when we gave thanks to the Earth Mother for her bounty and prayed for her continued favor through the harsh winter months. Everyone had a part to play. The women prepared the food, their hands, flour-dusted and busy, their songs filling the communal hall. The men, including my father, butchered the animals, sharpened their knives with rhythmic scrapes, and hauled firewood. Even us children had our duties, gathering dried herbs, polishing the communal platters until they gleamed, or chasing errant chickens that dared stray too close to the cooking fires. I remember the sun that morning, a pale, watery disk that struggled to break through the thick mist clinging to the river. It felt colder than usual, a damp, penetrating chill that no amount of running could shake off. Even the dogs seemed subdued, curling tighter by the hearths instead of romping through the lanes. My own breath plumed before me like a tiny cloud, and I shivered, pulling my worn wool tunic tighter. My mother, Elara, noticed. She always noticed. "Cold, my little sparrow?" she asked, her voice soft as the dawn light filtering through the window of our small cottage. She knelt, her calloused hands gently smoothing my messy brown hair. "The chill heralds the feast, child. It means the last of the harvest is in, and the bounty is ready." I nodded, though her words didn't quite banish the peculiar unease. My task for the morning was to help my father stack the firewood by the main hall. He was already there when I arrived, his axe glinting in the faint light as he split logs with powerful, practiced swings. The rhythm of his work was usually comforting, a steady beat of our village life. But today, even that felt off. He swung slower, his brow furrowed not with exertion, but with something else I couldn't quite name. "Father," I began, picking up a smaller log and trying to mimic his movements, though my arms ached almost, instantly. "Is something wrong?" He paused, resting the axe head on the chopping block. His eyes, usually crinkling at the corners when he looked at me, seemed distant, fixed on the distant line of the whispering peaks. "No, son. Just a feeling. The air is heavy, isn't it?" I agreed. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts and an unusual quietness that settled over the village. The normal chatter and laughter were muted, replaced by the crackle of fires and the occasional clatter of pots. It was as if Oakhaven held its breath, waiting for something more than just the feast. Old Man Silas, the village elder and our wisest storyteller, was sitting by the entrance of the communal hall carving a small wooden bird. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, moved with surprising agility. He was usually surrounded by children, eager for a tale, but today he sat alone. His presence, though, was a beacon. "Morning, Old Man Silas," I called, dropping my log pile with a thud. He looked up, his ancient eyes, the color of faded sky, settling on me. A faint smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Caleb, my boy, come, sit. You look troubled." I sat beside him on the rough-hewn bench, picking at a loose splinter. "Father says the air is heavy. It feels quiet." Silas chuckled, a dry rustle like leaves skittering across frozen ground. Aye, the air does whisper secrets to those who listen. The Earth Mother prepares her slumber, and sometimes her dreams are restless. He paused, turning the wooden bird over in his palm. A great feast is a joyous thing, but it is also a culmination, a closing of one cycle, before the long sleep of winter begins. And sometimes endings, they can be unpredictable. His words, spoken so casually, sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. Unpredictable. What could be unpredictable about a feast we'd held every year since before my grandparents were born? Later, as the sun climbed higher, finally burning off the last wisps of fog, the village began to stir with more purpose. The scent of roasting meat started to drift from the communal ovens, mingling with the earthy aroma of root vegetables and the sweet tang of spiced wine. Children, forgetting their earlier quietude, began to chase each other, their shouts echoing through the lanes. My own spirits lifted. The peculiar feeling was probably just my imagination, fueled by Old Man Silas's riddles and the morning chill. My mother called me to help lay out the wooden trenchers and clay cups on the long tables. Inside the hall, the communal hall was vast, its timber beams dark with age and smoke. Banners depicting scenes of bountiful harvests and hunting triumphs hung from the rafters. Fire pits in the center of the hall, usually filled with crackling flames, were still, being prepared, awaiting the evening's grand lighting. As I worked, setting out each trencher with care, I imagined the hall filled with people, their faces flushed with warmth and laughter, their voices raised in song. The centerpiece of the feast was always the great boar, roasted whole over a massive fire pit. This year's boar was the largest anyone could remember, a magnificent beast that had taken several hunters days to track and bring down. My father had spoken of it with reverence, its sheer size a testament to the Earth Mother's generosity. I snuck a peek at it, laid out on a massive wooden platter outside the hall, ready to be carried in. Its skin, already glistening with herbs and fat, promised rich, tender meat. As the afternoon wore on, the sky overhead, which had been a clear, crisp blue, began to take on a strange hue. Not the usual rosy blush of sunset, but a peculiar, almost sickly green. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as a trick of the light. But as more and more villagers noticed it, a murmur went through the crowd. People paused in their tasks, looking up, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and concern. "What is that, Father?" I asked, tugging on his sleeve as we stacked the last of the firewood. He too was staring at the sky. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. "I've never seen a sky like it, Caleb," he finally said, his voice low. "It feels unnatural." Old Man Silas, who had since joined a small group of elders, pointed a trembling finger at the sky. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of grave apprehension. His words, though quiet, carried in the suddenly still air. "The spirits are displeased. This is a sign." A hush fell over the village. The earlier lightheartedness evaporated completely, replaced by a palpable tension. The children stopped their games, huddling close to their parents. The smell of roasting food, once comforting, now seemed to hang ominously in the eerie green light. The joyous anticipation of the feast was slowly being choked by a growing sense of dread. Despite the unsettling sky, the preparations continued. The feast had to happen. It was tradition. It was our duty. As dusk gathered, the first stars began to pierce through the strange green firmament, twinkling with an unusual intensity. Torches were lit, casting dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe like unseen spirits. The main fire pits in the communal hall were finally ablaze, their warmth a welcome comfort against the deepening chill that now truly permeated the air, a cold that seeped into your bones despite the fires. The villagers began to gather, dressed in their finest, but their usual boisterous greetings were subdued. Faces that should have been alight with merriment were instead shadowed with unease. My mother tried to smile at me, but her lips trembled slightly. Even the oldest members of Oakhaven, who had seen countless seasons come and go, whispered amongst themselves about the unnatural sky, about the heavy silence that had fallen over the forest in the days leading up to the feast, about the strange dreams some had reported. My own heart thumped a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I kept glancing up at the strange green sky, half expecting it to splinter and fall. The smell of the feast was potent now, rich and inviting, but something in my stomach twisted. It wasn't hunger. It was a knot of fear, tightening with every passing moment. The night of the harvest feast, the most anticipated night of the year, was upon us. But the joy was missing, replaced by a chilling premonition that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. As the last rays of the green-tinged twilight faded, casting long, grotesque shadows across the fields, I knew with a child's instinctive certainty that this feast would be unlike any other. It felt less like a celebration and more like a waiting for the unknown to finally descend. And as the first hearty cheer of the elder, welcoming everyone to the feast, rang hollow in the eerily quiet air, a shiver, deeper than any cold, ran through me. The elder's voice, usually booming with good cheer, sounded thin and reedy in the suddenly still air. His welcoming words seemed to dissolve into the chill that had truly settled upon Oakhaven, a cold that bit deeper than mere autumn winds. As people found their places at the long tables, their movements were hesitant, their eyes constantly darting towards the vast opening where the great boar was to be brought in. The green sky, though now a deep twilight, still cast an unsettling luminescence, painting the familiar faces around me in an alien glow. My family settled near one of the central fire pits, its flames struggling against the pervasive damp. My mother, Ilara, reached for my hand, her grip tighter than usual. I could feel the tremor in her fingers. My father, usually jovial and loud, sat with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the entrance, a grim set to his mouth. Even my younger sister, Lyra, who was usually a whirlwind of excited chatter at feasts, was quiet, clutching her wooden doll and staring wide-eyed at the shadows that danced on the hall's timber beams. Then came the procession. 4 of the strongest. Men, including Theron, our village's headhunter and a man of immense brawn, emerged from the outer kitchen, bearing the massive platter on which the roasted great boar lay. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. The boar, magnificent even in its demise, should have been a sight of triumph and abundance. But as it was carried slowly towards the elder's table, something about it seemed wrong. The herbs and spices that had been rubbed into its skin now seemed to cling to it like a shroud, and the glistening fat had a peculiar, almost iridescent sheen in the firelight. As they set it down, the air around it shimmered faintly, a visual distortion that made my eyes ache. A strange, sickly, sweet odor, distinctly different from the wholesome aroma of roasted meat, began to emanate from the boar. It was cloying, like overripe fruit mixed with something metallic, and it made the back of my throat prickle. A few people coughed, and the murmuring intensified. The elder, Master Brian, a man whose wisdom was as old as the whispering peaks themselves, approached the boar with the ceremonial knife. His hand, however, wavered. He paused, sniffing the air, his brow deeply furrowed. He looked towards old man Silas, who stood near the entrance, his eyes wide and fixed on the roasted beast. Silas shook his head almost imperceptibly, a gesture that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. Despite his clear apprehension, Master Brian had a duty. With a deep, shuddering breath, he raised the knife. The blade, catching the firelight, seemed to glow with an unnatural green, reflecting the sky outside. He plunged it into the boar's flank. Instead of the expected gush of rich, hot juices, a thin, dark, almost black liquid oozed out, pooling sluggishly on the platter. The sickly sweet smell intensified, now mingled with a sharp, acrid tang that stung my nostrils. A few women gasped, children began to whimper. Someone at the far end of a table retched. My mother pulled me closer, burying my head against her side, but I could still hear the growing clamor, the whispers turning into frightened cries. "What is this?" someone shouted, his voice thick with disgust and fear. Theron, the head hunter, stepped forward, his face pale. "Master Brian, this is not right. This is not the boar we prepared. We cleaned it, seasoned it. This is something else." Master Brian, his face ashen, stared at the dark liquid, then back at Theron. "But it is the beast you brought in, Theron. It was here, laid out." "Aye," Theron replied, his voice strained. "But it was not like this. The smell was clean, the flesh firm." He looked around, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Something has tainted it." Panic began to spread like wildfire. People pushed back from the tables, overturning trenchers, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and confusion. The delicious promise of the feast had curdled into a nightmare. The strange green sky, the heavy air, Old Man Silas's unsettling words, it all converged into a chilling realization. This was the unpredictable ending he had spoken of. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the hall, a sound so raw and full of terror that it silenced the growing clamor instantly. Everyone froze, turning towards the sound. It came from one of the younger villagers, a woman named Lyra's older brother, who had been among the first to approach the boar, perhaps out of sheer curiosity or foolish bravery. He stood there, clutching his chest, his face contorted in agony. His skin, already pale, was now taking on a faint, bruised, purplish hue. He staggered backward, his eyes rolling, and then, with a choked gurgle, he collapsed to the floor. His limbs twitched violently for a moment, then went still. A collective scream tore through the hall. My mother pulled me tighter, pressing my face into her tunic, trying to shield me from the sight. But I had seen enough. I had seen the vacant. Stare in his eyes, the unnatural color of his skin. He was gone, just like that. "Poison!" someone shrieked, the word igniting a new wave of pandemonium. People scrambled, desperate to get away from the tables, away from the tainted boar, away from the dead man. The communal hall, moments before a place of warmth and anticipation, became a swirling vortex of terror. My father grabbed my mother and me, pulling us away from the central commotion, towards the relative safety of the hall's edge. "Stay. Close, Elara! Caleb, do not let go!" Old Man Silas surprisingly moved forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the fallen man. He knelt, his fingers lightly touching the purplish skin, then drawing back as if burned. His face, already etched with worry, now showed a deep, profound despair. "This is not poison of the earth," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the panic. "This is a darkness from beyond." His words, meant for the few elders gathered around him, were drowned out by the screams of the villagers. Chaos reigned. People were trampling over each other, trying to get out of the hall. The entrance, usually wide and welcoming, now seemed like a narrow funnel, choked with desperate bodies. Then, from the direction of the open kitchen, where the boar had been kept, another scream rent the air, and another, and then a guttural roar, unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't an animal's roar. It was something deeper, more chilling, filled with malevolent intent. A hulking figure emerged from the kitchen's shadowy entrance. It was tall, impossibly tall, and wrapped in what looked like dark, decaying rags. Its form was indistinct in the flickering torchlight, but I could make out two glowing points of red, like embers, where its eyes should have been, and the smell, the sickly sweet metallic odor from the boar, was now overwhelmingly strong around. This creature, radiating from it like a foul aura. It shambled into the hall, its movements jerky and unnatural. In its massive clawed hand, it held one of the large roasting spits, dripping with the dark black liquid. It let out another bone-chilling roar, and then, with surprising speed, it lunged. The first victim was a young man, caught unaware in the stampede towards the exit. The creature impaled him with the spit, lifting him effortlessly into the air. The man screamed, a brief, horrifying sound, before his body went limp. The creature then flung him aside like a broken doll, his lifeless form crashing against a table. The hall erupted into pure pandemonium. The shouts of fear turned into shrieks of terror. There was a creature, something not of this world, attacking us. My father pushed us behind one of the massive timber pillars, shielding us with his body. I peered around him, my heart hammering against my ribs, so loud I thought it might burst. The creature moved with a grotesque efficiency, striking out at anyone within reach. It seemed to feed on the fear, growing stronger, its glowing red eyes burning brighter with each victim. The elders, who had been trying to restore order, were now scattered, their faces pale with horror. Even Theron, the brave hunter, stood, frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as his fellow villagers fell. My mother was sobbing, her body trembling uncontrollably as she held me and Lyra close. My father drew his hunting knife, a small, inadequate blade, against the monstrous being, but his stance was defiant. He would protect us. I knew that. "Stay here, both of you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Do not move. Not a sound." He took a cautious step from behind the pillar, his eyes fixed on the creature. It had just impaled another villager, its awful roar reverberating through the hall. The air was thick with the metallic smell of blood and that cloying sweetness, a smell that would forever be seared into my memory as the scent of death. The night the harvest feast turned deadly. Old Man Silas's words echoed in my mind, a chilling prophecy now horribly fulfilled. This was no mere sickness, no simple accident. This was a nightmare made real, stalking our sacred hall, turning our celebration into a slaughter. I could only watch, paralyzed by terror, as my village, my home, succumbed to the darkness that had arrived with the green sky and the tainted boar. The sounds of screams, the clang of overturned tables, and the creature's hideous roars filled the hall, a symphony of destruction that would haunt my dreams for years to come. The communal hall, once a sanctuary of warmth and joy, had become a chamber of horrors. The creature, a nightmare made flesh, moved with a horrifying, disjointed grace. It wasn't just powerful, it was fast. Faster than anything I had ever seen. Its glowing red eyes seemed to pierce the darkness, locking onto its next victim with chilling precision. The metallic stench intensified, mingling with the coppery tang of fresh blood, making my stomach churn. I pressed myself further against the cold timber pillar, my small body trembling, every muscle screaming at me to run, but my father's words held me frozen. "Do not move, not a sound." My father, bless his brave heart, was no fool. He knew his hunting knife was useless against such a monstrosity. But he was also a protector. And in that moment, his only thought was to shield his family. He scanned the hall, his eyes darting from the creature to the terrified villagers, searching for an opening, a way out. The main entrance was still choked, with people, a writhing mass of humanity caught in a desperate bottleneck. Even if we made it there, we'd be trampled. The creature's roars were not just sounds. They felt like physical blows, vibrating through the very timbers of the hall, rattling my teeth. It reveled in the chaos, each scream seemingly fueling its grotesque energy. It swung the blood-soaked roasting spit like a child's toy, sending, tables and trenchers flying, scattering food and terrified bodies. The air was thick with dust, the cries of the injured, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then, from the throng near the entrance, a voice cut through the cacophony. It was Theron, the headhunter. He had finally snapped out of his shock. "To me! To the weapons rack!" he bellowed, his voice raw with desperation, but also with a hint of his usual authority. He was pointing towards a section of the hall where our hunting spears and axes were usually stored during feasts, away from the tables. A few men, spurred by his command and the sheer terror of their situation, began to fight their way towards the rack. But the creature turned, its glowing red eyes fixing on Theron. It let out a truly horrifying, prolonged shriek, a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the air. It was a challenge, a declaration of its intent. Theron, despite his bravery, visibly flinched. My father saw his chance. While the creature's attention was momentarily diverted, he pulled my mother and me, along with Lyra, who was still silently weeping, into my mother's tunic, around the pillar and away from the central massacre. He moved with a swiftness I hadn't known he possessed, weaving through the fallen chairs and the scattered remnants of the feast. We were heading not for the main entrance, but for a smaller, less used side door that led to the storage cellars. It was dark, narrow, and often locked, but it was our only hope. "The cellar door," he gasped, pulling us forward. "It might be open. Master Brian always kept it clear for emergencies." As we scrambled, I risked a glance back. The creature was a blur of dark rags and flashing red eyes, swinging the spit with devastating force. Theron and a few other hunters had managed to reach the weapons rack. They fumbled for spears and axes, their faces grim, knowing the odds were stacked impossibly against them. They were buying time, sacrificing themselves so others might escape. My chest ached with a terrible sorrow and admiration. We reached the cellar door. It was heavy, made of thick oak and bound with iron. My father tried the latch, his hand shaking. It was stuck. "No, it's jammed!" he grunted, putting his shoulder into it, but it wouldn't budge. Despair threatened to engulf me. Were we trapped? Were we going to die here, like the others? Just then, old man Silas appeared beside us, seemingly out of nowhere. His face was pale and drawn, but his ancient eyes held a fierce determination. He carried no weapon, only a small, intricate wooden staff, its tip carved into the shape of a coiled snake. "Stand aside, son," he said to my father, his voice surprisingly firm. He touched the staff to the door. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the wood. He then placed his gnarled hand on the latch. "It is not jammed, my boy. It is warded, a protective spell put there long ago, but even old magic weakens with disuse." He closed his eyes, his lips moving in a silent incantation. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from his hand, bathing the latch in a soft, silvery light. With a loud click, the latch sprang open. "Quickly, down into the cellar," Silas urged, pushing us gently. "Do not look back. Do not stop." My father didn't hesitate. He pulled the heavy door open, revealing a steep, dark flight of stone steps leading down into the earth. The cool, damp air from below was a stark contrast to the inferno of terror above. My mother and Lyra stumbled down, almost falling in their haste. I followed, my eyes still fixed on Silas. He stood by the open door, his back to us, facing the creature. He was muttering, not a spell, but words of old, forgotten tales, his voice surprisingly strong. The monster had finally broken through the hunter's desperate resistance. Theron lay motionless, a spear broken in his hand, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The creature was now advancing towards the cellar door, its glowing red eyes fixed on Silas. "Go, Caleb," Silas commanded, not looking at me. "Live! Remember Oakhaven!" I hesitated, wanting to beg him to come with us, but my father pulled me roughly down the steps. The last thing I saw before the door swung shut was old man Silas, standing defiant, his small figure silhouetted against the raging chaos of the hall, the ancient wooden staff held aloft, glowing faintly. Then the heavy door slammed shut with a resounding thud, plunging us into suffocating darkness and the chilling silence of the cellar. We huddled together at the bottom of the steps, shivering. My mother sobbed quietly, her face buried in my father's shoulder. Lyra was silent, her small body still shaking. The metallic smell from above seemed to seep through the very stones, a constant reminder of the horror we had just witnessed. My heart hammered and my ears strained, listening for any sound from above. There was a muffled clang, a distant roar, then nothing. Just the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the darkness of the cellar. The silence was almost worse than the screams. It was the silence of death, of absence. "Father," I whispered, my voice barely a squeak. "Old man Silas." My father pulled us closer, his arms strong around us, but his body was rigid, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We all knew. Silas had sacrificed himself. He had held the line, bought us precious seconds, so we could escape. The cellar was cold, musty, and filled with the faint scent of earth and stored root vegetables. We stumbled forward in the darkness, my father feeling his way along the stone wall until we found a small, dusty corner. We sank to the ground, huddling together for warmth and comfort. Time stretched on, an agonizing eternity. Every creak of the old timbers above, every rustle of unseen things in the darkness, sent jolts of fear through us. We didn't know if the creature was still above, if it had found another way into the cellar, or if it had finally finished its work and moved on. The silence was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing and my mother's quiet sobs. My mind reeled. The feast, the great boar, the green sky, the glowing eyes, the deaths. It had happened so fast, a joyous celebration twisted into a living nightmare in mere moments. Oakhaven, my home, the place of warmth and laughter, was gone, replaced by a scene of unimaginable horror. My father finally stirred. "We must wait," he whispered, his voice hoarse and raw. "Wait until morning. If there is a morning." His words were bleak, but they also held a glimmer of hope, a desperate clinging to the idea that the sun would rise again, that this nightmare might finally end. But even as he spoke them, I knew. Nothing would ever be the same. The night, the harvest feast turned deadly, had taken not just lives, but the very heart and soul of Oakhaven.